are called to grow in God's gifts of wisdom and discerning spirit. 26 July 2020, 17th Sunday of the Ordinary Times in the Liturgy. Both the first reading and the Gospel passage today speak about the need for wisdom and proper discernment in our lives. The first reading from first book of Kings chapter 3 verse 5 and 7 to 12 describes how Solomon asked God for the gift of wisdom. He had his priority clear so as to ask God for the most important gift. And in the Gospel passage from Matthew chapter 44 to 52, we see how the merchant sold out all his possessions to buy the great treasure or the great pearl. He has a discerning spirit to assess which is the most valuable thing to possess and so on. A few words about the King Solomon. He rules the united Israel for about 40 years from 970 to 931 BCE. He succeeds his father King David. Solomon becomes the king in a very tough situation. His father David is very old now. David's son Adoniah wants to assume power, while Bathsheba, with the help of Nathan, makes Solomon the king. King David is helpless here. Solomon is, Solomon is very young, just less than 20 years of age. He offers sacrifice to God at Gibeon as thanksgiving for making him the king. He, he promises to God that he will be faithful in following the commandments. He faces lots of challenges from neighbors, so he is naturally afraid of his responsibility. He decides, therefore, that he has to have a good understanding and discerning mind to rule God's people with justice. So, in the dream, he is asking God for the same, and God is so pleased with him that he says, "Because you have asked for the wisdom to rule justly, instead of long life for yourself, or riches, or the death of your enemies, I will do what you have asked for. I'll give you more wisdom and understanding than anyone has ever had before you or will ever have again. I will also give you what you have not asked for. All your life you will have wealth and honor more than that of any other king." As I was reflecting upon this event, two questions came up to my mind. Solomon, a great wise man, richly blessed by God, why did he go away from him at the later part of his life? And the second question is, he asked for wisdom, but unless he already had some element of wisdom and discernment, he would not have asked for it. Perhaps he would have asked for riches or long life. So, that basic element of wisdom, from where did it come to Solomon in the first place? Now, regarding the first question, Solomon, blessed by God, endowed with great wisdom, riches, and honor that no other king on the earth has ever had nor will have in future. Such a great man, how come he went against God in the later part of his life? He was the first one to build the temple of God, Yahweh, but later he built temples and altars for other gods as well. Twice God appeared to him in a dream to caution, to correct his wrong ways, but Solomon did not listen to God. This made God angry with him. God punishes him, saying, "That you have gone away from me, I will divide your kingdom, therefore." Some biblical scholars say that the writer of the book of the Kings might have exaggerated a bit the glory of the king, as that was a custom of the writers those days. Be that as it may, There can be another explanation, in my opinion, why such a great man Solomon went against God in the later part of his life. Solomon was truly a wise man, but why did he go away from God? Let us read the text again. He tells God, I am very young. I don't know how to rule the people whom you have chosen to be your own. So, give me the wisdom I need to rule your people with justice and to know the difference between good and evil. Otherwise, how would I ever be able to rule this great people of yours? So, it's very clear that Solomon is asking for wisdom and discernment to give his people good governance, to be a successful king. But he did not ask for wisdom to live a good life, to be a good man, to have morally upright life personally. So he could not use his discernment and wisdom for his own personal life, I think. Very often in our lives, too, we see we are experts in giving advice to others. We are good in finding out the mistakes of others. For example, when someone is not well, we give lots of advice regarding how to avoid illness and some medications, even. We tell them not to worry, but some illness comes to us, we get worried. Similarly, we point out the mistakes of the others very easily, but we are not aware of our own mistakes. That's what Jesus tells us very clearly in Matthew chapter 7 verse 5. Remove the log out of your own eye, and then you can see clearly to remove the speck of your brother's eye. That makes it clear that we need to use wisdom and discernment personally for our own lives also. Further, we need strength and courage to go by what our discernment tells us. Very often, we realize, but we don't have enough strength and courage to put that realization into action. For instance, we may have some bad habits, and we are wise enough to know, to realize that that habit is bad, but still we are not able to give it up. Why? Because we often lack in willpower and strength to overcome it. Further, whatever God's gifts are blessings to us, but we need to constantly strive to grow in them. We have to try to maintain them. For instance, faith is God's gift to us. We have received it freely from our parents, others, and society, but we need to make efforts to grow deeper in it. Day by day, we need to try. Unless we strive hard, it can slowly diminish. Like an oil lamp, it needs constant attention by way of kindling it regularly. Faith is defined as a gift as well as a task. In our spiritual life also, we may have reached a certain stage, certain level, but unless we try, we will not remain at that level, we will gradually come down. So, in my opinion, Solomon did not constantly strive to keep God's gift of wisdom alive. He did not grow in that daily. He used it very well to govern the people, but unfortunately not for his own personal life. Coming to the second question, Solomon decides to ask for wisdom and discernment instead of riches or long life or the victory over his enemies. Unless he has already some element of wisdom in him, he would not have made such a plea to God. So, even before God manifestly granted him the wisdom, he already had some raise, some element of wisdom. Now, the question is, where does that little wisdom come from in the first place? To get the answer for this question, I think the idea of a great modern philosopher, Immanuel Kant, can help us. Kant says, two things fill me with great awe and wonder. One, the starry heavens up above there, and two, the moral law within me. Yes, we live in an amazing universe. we can never know how many stars are there in the universe. Even if we live forever, we will never come to know how many stars are there in the universe because the universe is constantly expanding at a very high speed. And therefore, we are going away from the stars, and the light from those stars will never reach us. And unless we will never know that those stars exist at all. Further, we will never know how big the universe is because the known universe is 93 billion light years. That is 558 followed by 21 zeros kilometer. 558 followed by 21 zeros kilometers wide. And the unknown universe is much than the known universe. The unknown universe is 150 sextillion times bigger than the universe. That is 83,700 followed by 42 zeros kilometer wide. This is a great mystery. We can't even imagine such a huge numbers in our minds. So such a vast universe is a great surprise mystery. Similarly, the moral law within me, that is, everyone has a sense within oneself regarding the difference between good and bad, right and wrong, and further, there is a natural tendency within us to choose what is good and right. Human beings always have been having a sense of difference between good and bad, right and wrong. Every human society across the globe living for thousands of years, they have the sense of good and bad, right and wrong, some sense of distinction. Of course, people in various countries at various times may differ in considering what is good or bad, right or wrong, but they all always have a sense of something to be right and wrong and something else to be good and bad. Now, Kant is asking who instilled that moral sense within all human beings. It is not from any particular society or culture at a particular time. This seems to be an universal fact. This fact of universal sense of moral consciousness is often used as a moral argument for the existence of God. Further, there is a natural desire in us to always do what is good and right. That is why, for every action, we find some justification to show that we are always right. For instance, when we punish someone or scold someone angrily, we know it is painful for that person, but still we justify ourselves saying that I am teaching him or her a lesson in his or her life. Another example would be when a robber goes to a bank for looting, he knows it is wrong, but he justifies saying that I am right in robbing the bank because I am poor, I have no money, but lots of other people have extra money to keep it in the bank. The society has a duty to feed me, therefore, it is not wrong for me to rob the bank. Often, we may be wrong in judging something to be right or good, obviously. We may be wrong in finding justification, but we always tend to do what we think to be right and good. Therefore, we need to carefully analyze and check our judgments and justifications, convictions and principles. We need wisdom and discernment. We need humility and openness to discuss with others, to get clarifications, and always be ready to correct our wrong understanding and so on. Thus, in short, we can learn at least three lessons from the King Solomon. One, as Solomon had, we need to have wisdom and a good sense of discernment. Two, let us continuously make efforts to grow deeper in the gifts that God has given us. Otherwise, those gifts will become ineffective. And third, let us constantly check whether our moral judgments are correct. Otherwise, we may wrongly take something to be right and good, but which is actually wrong and bad. Let us think about it today.